Athens and Sparta, Section 4, Chapter 6, Greece. Okay, we're talking about Spartan life and particularly Spartan boys. Spartan boys were raised to endure pain and to learn to survive with very little food. That was what the Spartans wanted to impress upon all their boys that grew up into soldiers. Life was very tough, harsh. The Spartans were silent, tough, and grim. And because of all the wars, Sparta turned into a war machine. And Sparta's motto was, always put your city's needs above your own. So, along with growing up, only the healthiest children were raised. If a child was born sick, they would leave it in the mountains to die, unfortunately. So when the boys reached age of 7, their mothers had to send them off to military barracks where they trained to be a soldier for 13 years. Now the girls, they also trained and they competed in Olympic type sports, but they did not compete in Olympic Games and they did not practice with boys. They practiced amongst themselves because Sparta wanted their girls to be strong, so that the belief was that their children would be strong if their mothers were strong. And also in Sparta, women were allowed to own land and take part in business. Now, by 520 BC, the Persian Empire, as you can see from the map, started threatening Greece. They started to control the islands around Turkey, which is across the sea from Greece. In 490 BC, thousands of Persians gathered at Marathon to face a small Athenian army. For several days, both armies stared intensely at each other. The Athenians rushed without warning and defeated the Persians, killing 6,400 soldiers and losing only 192 of their own soldiers. So you can just imagine that. So after the Persians were defeated, of course, Athens was celebrated as being one of the best city-states in Greece. And it had a lot of influence over other city-states. Many of the other city-states wanted to ally with them so that if there was a war, the Athenian army would protect them as well. So these city-states, they pledged their loyalty to Athens. But as time went on, the city-states started to resent the fact that Athens was getting rich because they were paying tribute or taxes to Athens for protection. And they just saw the Athenians spend all that money on the Parthenon and buildings and temples and sculptures that made Athens beautiful, and they started to not like that. So that sentiment grew, and they started to leave Athens and follow their allegiance to Sparta. So Athens and Sparta, it started to get very heated between them, so they went to war in 431 BC. The war lasted for 27 years, and this war is called the Peloponnesian War. Early in the war, Athens was struck by a plague. Okay, remember, a plague is a widespread disease. Now, the Spartans saw that as an opportunity because over 1/3 of the population in Athens died. Sparta saw the weakness of Athens and they engaged in creating a blockade, which is another term which means to block off supplies. They blockaded the sea, the harbor, and they wouldn't let supplies come in by ship to Athens, forcing them to surrender in 404 BC. So Sparta defeats Athens. Okay, what do we have to remember in this section? We have to remember what life was like for Spartan boys. Remember how they left their homes at the age of 7 to train to become a soldier. They trained for 13 years, and during that time they practiced with swords and spears. Spartan soldiers were trained to go with little food or were encouraged to steal and not get caught, for they would be severely punished. Boys were trained to bear pain without showing it. What was life like for women in Sparta? Girls were not trained as soldiers, however, they were encouraged to exercise and become strong. Women were allowed to own land and work in businesses. What were the important wars in Greece? Remember, the Athenian army defeated the Persians who tried to invade. But in 431 BC, Athens and Sparta went to war, which lasted 27 years. Sparta was victorious.